And now, drum roll, we are going to have, drum roll. So we have invited Ruth Bostad. I met Ruth on a leadership outing that we did down at in Northfield, Minnesota at St. Olaf College. And she gave a presentation, and I was so impressed, and the students were so impressed, that I invited her to come and be our keynote speaker. I'm not going to tell you what she's going to talk about. She will tell you that. But I can tell you that I think you'll leave her presentation inspired and a little bit more knowledgeable about how to start out the semester when it comes to studying. Studying is something that we don't always learn in school. We do not learn how. We're just expected to know this. So people say, I'm going to study hard, and sometimes we don't know really what that means. Does it mean time? Putting time into studying? Does that mean study hard? But Ruth is going to talk about studying efficiently and effectively. Let's hear it for Ruth Bostad.
Strategist or a learning strategist. Just like anything else, I've learned a lot of things along the way, mostly listening to students and saying, what made a difference. The motto in our office is helping you with your plan to be a better student. You're all students. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. You got here because you did a lot of hard work in another school environment. This one is a new environment in many ways, partly because it's just a different place. But mostly because it's a different kind of education. How many people in here, is there anybody in here who is a basketball player? Anybody a basketball player? There you go. Okay. How many of you play basketball? Oh, come on. Really? Y'all have played basketball, haven't you? Oh, sure. You've all played basketball, right? Any chefs in here? Any chefs? Okay. How many people are cooks? Okay. Inspiring chefs. Okay. How many people in here are musicians? How many people have played an instrument or sung in a choir? Wow. Okay. Any of those. If you think of any of those, and then plug all that in, how different is a chef from somebody who cooks? What's the difference? Training, right? That's a profession. Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. What's the difference between a basketball player and somebody who plays basketball? If you're playing for a high school or a college, you're still a basketball player, right? Right? What's the difference between a high school basketball player and somebody who plays basketball in high school? Yes. Hockey, same way, all of those. What's the biggest difference, though, if you look at what they do?
Practice.
Yeah. It's about the practice, right? It's about being invested. It's about being a part of it every day. So there's a difference between being a learner and a doer. Most of what we've done in high school is doing things, right? We do things, we hand it in, right? Do you get credit for handing it in? Yeah, did you learn anything? Not necessarily. Or you might have just done it to get it done, and you hand it in, right? Not a lot of learning necessarily. Does that happen in college? Yes. Should it? No. If you look at somebody who is please don't hurt me, and I know that I'm using the wrong word, but you want to be a player. You don't want to be somebody who plays. That's right. Know what I mean? Got it? Anybody else got it? That makes sense? You want to be the chef of your education. Right? That's right. Got it? Plug in whatever that is for you. And so every time you look at being a student, connect it to whatever that is. Okay? So if you need to lift weights for being a basketball player or for being a football player, how do you equate that with your education? Study, certainly. And what else?
Consistency.
Consistent.
You have to spend time with it.
Spend time with it. repetition, apply, yes, and knowing what it means. So I'm going to go in there. If I just lift, am I doing much? Probably not. But if I know that, and you may see the same action, it may look the same. I may turn in the same assignment. But if my muscles then are tighter and I'm lifting, right? Am I making a bigger difference? You bet. So you can hand in the same assignment that somebody else does. You can get the same grade as somebody else does. Who is probably more productive or is a better learner? Right? The one that is the titan, the one that thinks about it, the one that puts that energy into it, understands what it's all about, how it fits and how it works. Does that make sense? So it's about investment. It's about figuring out how to be the best student you can be. So when we look at that, it's really easy to say that philosophically, right? I'm going to study every day. So studying every day is critical, right? Knowing why you're doing something. Because it's about talking to the coach, right? If you're going to play basketball, if you don't talk to the coach, you're probably not going to be as good at basketball there, right? So when we look at being a student then, the first thing that happens is you're given information that you're expected to remember. The first thing you do is you have to memorize it so that you can start to use it. So let's start with the memorizing because you have to start there, right? You have to learn what's going on. Here's something that I think is really helpful when you look at what that means again and again, putting it into the context of being a student. When you look at your memory, they did a study where they put students into a classroom. They lectured, and then they tested them as soon as they were done with that lecture. And those students remembered 80% of that information. So already they're down 20%. Why are they down 20%? They're not the coach, right? They're not the teacher. Right? Does that make sense? Do you remember about 80% of what you hear after someone? Do you remember about 80% of the TV show that you watched? Probably. Or a movie, and then you walk out and somebody says, oh, that part, oh my God. I didn't see that. Oh, that's right. Right? Happen? So you remember 80%. Whether it be a conversation, whether it be a movie, whether it be something that is part of your social life or part of your academic life, you remember about 80% of what is delivered to you as soon as that event is done. What they found was that 24 hours later, students remember between 20 and 40%. So if I asked you what you had for lunch yesterday, unless it was really special, or unless you reviewed it and talked about it again, connected it to something, you probably won't remember what you had for lunch yesterday. Or if I asked you about the conversation you had with your parent last on the phone, would you be able to do that? You might be able to give you the essence of it. But to really remember all the details, and even if you told me what you had for lunch yesterday, then I'm going to say, okay, what color plate was it? And what size was the spoon? And how much was on the plate in the way of weight? What was the temperature? Aren't all those the things that you're asked once you're given information? Right? So that information is delivered. What this study said is that a student's waited 1 to 2 hours. So it goes into your short-term memory, and then it soaks back into your brain. You need to bring it back again. And when you bring it back in again, it looks and it says, oh, there's amoeba, or there's whatever that definition is. So you start to make that connection and start to memorize it or connect it. Why do you have memories of being 2 years old? Because somebody kept saying that story again and again and again. Do you remember everything from 2 years old? No. So the idea is that in this study, what they did was, the first day, they reviewed this information for 10 minutes. 10 quick minutes. And then the next day, they reviewed for 5 minutes, and the next day, they reviewed for 3 minutes. And what they found was that people remembered 90% of that information. Because you start to connect it, and you start to connect it to other thoughts and other ideas. So the first thing you do is to memorize it. And then you have to understand it. And I'm going to take it a little bit further than that. Are you ready? It's all theoretical, but you do plug it in. This is Bloom's taxonomy of learning, a little bit revised, because we wanted to flip it upside down. The first thing you need to know for any kind of information, anything, you need to know the facts. Again, right? You have to know the facts. You have to know it, memorize it. Then you have to be able to apply it, right? Plug it in. You have to be able to plug it in. You have to be able to apply it. And then you need to say, but I really want to understand or comprehend that. So that it becomes more than just plugging in facts and throwing out information. Because if you're going to be in that nursing program or that paralegal program, and you're going to walk into those environments, you're not going to walk in and say, well, here are my bullet points for this deal, right? But you need to know those bullet points. This, however, is called lower order thinking skills. Lower order thinking skills means that you know it, you put it together, you plug it in, you know basically what to do, right? I walked into the physician that I had this rash in my eye, still have it. I walked in and I said to the physician, something has to happen with this. I understand that rashes are the most difficult thing to diagnose or to work with as a physician. They'll tell you that. I get that. I also know the science and medicine is not an exact deal where you plug in something. But I walked in and I said, this is what's happening. I really need to fix this because my eye had swollen shut and it's all red and icky, right? She looks at me. She looks at her computer. She pulls up some med thing, I assume, and starts looking at the rash and trying to match it. I could have done that at home as a therapist. I could do that. She went to school. She got really good grades. She went to medical school and got really good grades.
They charge you a whole lot of money to come to it.
$139. And I was not very happy. Right?
You're right. You're right.
You don't want to be that position.
No.
Right? Whatever profession you're in, you don't want to be that position, right? You want to be somebody that thinks, that works with material. So here's the deal. Now that you got this down, this is what we would consider to be above the surface of the water. The Titanic should not sink. Smart people should not fail. But quite frequently, we come into this environment smart. What we fail to do is look at what the reality of your education really is, which is HOTS, higher order thinking skills. Okay? I want to take that information that I know, the stuff I can plug in, the stuff I understand, I can comprehend it well enough, and I want to be able to do some analysis with it. I want to say, what does this mean? How does this work? How do you figure this out? Because then I'm a player. Does that make sense? I'm now a player. Otherwise, I'm just playing. Right? So I want to be a player. I want to be a chef. In order to do that, I have to be able to take this material and do other things with it. So just because you're done with homework, doesn't mean you do. In your job, and you already have had jobs like this, every day is a test. Right? Every day is a test. As a parent, every day is a test, right? And if you haven't thought about it, if you haven't worked it through, if you haven't figured it out, you haven't analyzed what's going on, you've learned all the stupid stuff to your kid, right? You want to be a deeper learner. You want to be somebody who plays basketball on the driveway, right? You don't want to be just somebody who just goes to practice and just talks to the coach and just does this stuff. You want to invest yourself. You want to be a part of it. But if you know that stuff well enough, first of all, it doesn't matter what's on the test, right? Because it can come from any angle because you know it. So if you're going to go out and play basketball, if you're going to be a chef, you know how to say, you know what, just dump it in the morning. And you all have things that you do like that, right? You can think of those things that you have invested yourself in. Always invest in your education in that same way. There is a study. BARC is one of the ones that you've heard of, right?
I'm familiar, yes.
Yep. And truly, visual learners, auditory learners, reading and writing, they put the same one. There's different things, but that's okay. And kinesthetic. Kinesthetic is hands-on kind of stuff, right? These are all different ways of learning things. Are there others? Yeah, there are. These are the main ones, for sure. And what we have looked at some of the studies is that, oh, if I'm a visual learner, I better learn all visually. And if I'm an auditory learner, I better learn all auditory. First thing I'll do is go through the study and then I'll say something else. They did a study where they had professors who said, I will teach all visually. And no, none of this, couldn't do it. None of this, it was all visual. As, you know, we're drawing on the boards, we're doing pictures, we're drawing, right? Doing the whole deal. As much as they could. Auditory, did all verbal, nothing written. They didn't read anything, all they did was the auditory part. Then there was a group that did just reading and writing, so it's like an online class for the most part, right? I think they took that out of the study because they felt it didn't work as well because you have to do these when you do the kinesthetics. If you're doing a lab kind of thing, because it was a chemistry class. Anyway, what they found at the end of the semester was that the people who claimed to be visual learners had the lowest grade in the visual class. People who had the auditory had the lowest in the auditory. Isn't that interesting? Why do you think that is?
Well, you weren't using all the aspects of learning.
So if I'm an auditory learner, and I hear anything auditory, I say, oh yeah, okay, I got it. The person who's a visual learner has to go, wait, what'd you say again? And they're writing stuff down, right? And then they're doing two ways of connecting that material. So when you're coming back and looking at that material, they've already, in some sense, reviewed it once, right? Does that make sense? So the more you can mix this up and do as many of these as possible, the better you are.
I totally agree.
Now, sometimes it's very, very helpful to start where you're most comfortable. Find what that way is that might be the best way as your inroad, and then move forward, right? So mix it up. Okay, that makes sense?
And I think it's important for these beginning students to also know that I really had a tough time when I first entered college. And it was because I did not know that there are different types of learning. So there were some situations that straight lecture. I really felt I was dumb.
Yeah, you look at the problems like,
right. But when I seen it on paper, I knew everything. I knew exactly what was going on.
yep. And so sometimes when you get into class, I think part of it is evaluating when you're in that class too, to say, is this because I didn't prep? Somebody said that in this group too. I didn't prep before I got to the class. Because what would happen if you prepped before you got to the class? If you read a review of a movie before you get there, my guess is you'll remember more of the movie when you leave, right? Because you already know more. That's right. You've already come into it when you want. So truly, somebody said prepare for class and always be prepared for class. If you read and do all your stuff prior to class, you're going to be a whole lot better off. That's how you get here as well. Because what you're doing is, if you take that material that you've learned auditorily, you've memorized all the stuff and you have all the bullet lists and you're just ready for the test, if you really learned. You're ready for the test because you've memorized everything. Go back now and what you said, say it out loud. Write it on the board. Draw a picture of it. Talk to somebody else. Go to Wikipedia and say, are they saying what I think I know? And if they don't, it's not that they're right. It's that I need to then analyze what that information is, right? And say, is this correct? Go to YouTube. Find resources. What do you do if you're a basketball player? You obviously say, yeah, right? You do the basketball stuff. You do more things than just go to practice and talk to the coach. Here's the next piece that I think is pretty critical. When you're working on stuff, sometimes people say, if I just keep working, keep doing it. If I play basketball for 3 hours, am I going to be a better basketball player than if I play for 1.5? At a time. Probably not. Why? You're not retaining it, probably for the most part. Exactly. And here's why. Concentration curve. This is a study that was done where they said that the brain can be productive, not productive. See that? Oh yeah. This is all learning over time, right? This is all learning. Right up here, however, is when the short-term memory fills up. When the short-term memory fills up, it's like a glass. Say your short-term memory is a glass. And the water is the information that you're putting into it. Okay, so I read the first chapter. Boom, my glass is full. really hate to read that sentence, Jack. Orange juice. What happens? It overflows. What happens first? Physics major. What happens first? It dilutes it, right? It mixes up, right? It mixes up and it overflows. You no longer have water or orange juice. So when you go back to review it, you go back and review, and it's like you say, let's put the orange juice in. The brain looks around and says, I see orange juice. I see something that kind of looks like it, so I might be able to kind of connect it. So you're in the middle of studying stuff, and you're really not studying it. You have to relearn it. You have to go back and do it all over again. Extremely inefficient, right? Do we do that? Sure we do. Sure we do. So this is your short-term memory. Your short-term memory is affected. Let's talk about getting your cells ready to be as productive as they can be, because that's what you're talking about. Is how do you get your brain cells ready to be as strong as they can be, right? What's the #1 study strategy ever?
Yes. Sleep.
Yes, sleep.
Thank you. #1 for anything you do, anything. Every study that we've ever seen says, guess what? You need to sleep. 2 rules. The first rule is the most important rule. Get up at the same time every day. And that doesn't mean Monday through Friday, and then, oh, see, I'll sleep in on the weekends. It means every day. Because if you do Monday through Friday, getting up at 7 o'clock every day, and then on Saturday you sleep in 2 hours, maybe 3, your brain just said, oh, you change time zones. And so you just went from taking classes in New York to being in California or Denver, somewhere in there, wherever that is.
California.
Jet lag. Because your brain is trying to figure out how to be in this new time zone. And so on Saturday afternoon, it's like, oh, I just better take a nap because I don't know when I'm going to sleep again because now we're in a new time zone and we can figure this all out. So you're a little nappy in the afternoon, even though you slept in. And got more sleep. And got a lot of sleep, probably more than you got during the week. Like, oh, it's because I'm tired from the week. It's because you slept too long and you slept in and your brain had to recalculate what's going on. So Sunday, we're still here in Denver or Los Angeles, right? And we slept in and the brain goes, oh, I get it. We changed time zones for sure. And then Monday morning comes and I'm back in New York and I am so tired. Right? It is about your brain needs that consistency. Your brain needs that consistency of the same time every day. Now, if I fly from New York to Minneapolis, big deal? Not really. 1 hour difference is not a big deal, say most of the studies. The tough part is when people say, oh, but on Tuesday, Thursday, I have class later, so I don't need to get up on those days, I'll just get up Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Whoa. So the whole week is flying back and forth. No good. No good. Same time every day. And so if your class doesn't start until 11 on Tuesday, Thursday, and on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, it starts at 8. You can still get up at 8. You can get up within that 1 hour. Then what are you going to do between 8 and 11? Study. Oh, you can study. You can do errands. You can do all sorts of things. Your brain is going to be much more functional. And I will tell you this also. Studies say that, and truly students say as well, if you stay up late on Friday night, so I'm going to stay up until 3 in the morning on 3 in the morning. It was fun. I had a great conversation. And I need to get up at 7. Get up at 7 or 8. Because those 4 or 5 hours are going to do your brain more good than if you sleep and get 9 or 10 hours. Try it. Try it. It's pretty amazing.
So what's your advice for a person that has a really hectic schedule? It fluctuates from day to day. You're juggling school, family, work.
As consistent as you can be. And I'll tell you this, and I did a catering event yesterday. I did one today. I had a staff meeting today. I drove up here. I've got 2 kids in one in high school, one in college. He just went back to school, and so I'm doing his paperwork for the, right? So I'm there with you. I'm so there with you. As consistent as you can be. I stayed up until 3 in the morning for the first catering event because I just had a lot of things to do because I had to work during the day. So I stayed up until 3 in the morning. I still got up at my 6:30. Functional yesterday. Functional. Did the next catering event stay up last night until 1:30? I do not recommend any of this. Right? But it is what you're talking about, right? It's that, oh my gosh, I have to stay up and do this and do that, whatever that is. Now, I will tell you that naps are okay, and all the studies say that naps are good. Naps are very good. Naps allow your brain, actually it's called spindling. Whatever information is in there, if you take a nap, there's no new information coming in, so there's no oranges coming in, right? So if you take that nap, just close your eyes. It allows everything to sink back in, and they actually show the brain kind of relaxing. It's the coolest thing. No longer than 45 minutes. That is an Air Force study, actually, where they did the 4 hours on, 4 hours off. They did all those kind of studies with the sleep stuff. And what they found was that after 45 minutes, your brain thinks it's going in another direction. If you're getting too short at a time, your judgment calls are off, and you can't learn anything anyway. Nothing comes in. So this amount of time is based on what's happening here, right? If I would try to have studied yesterday morning, after staying up till 3 and getting up, right? Probably not real things, right? But can I still do things? Can I still function? Yeah. And so what we think is like, oh, everything's cool. I can do everything. You can't. You can't learn. You can't think. You can't piece those things together, right? Does that make sense? So I get it. And it is the story of life. It's not just the story of being a student. You will forever be in that mode if you're excited about what's going on. True statement? Right? So the idea is figure out how as consistent as you can be with a routine. School is one of those things that it has to be your priority, but you have all these other things going on, which you have to be priority too. So it's like everything, right? Figure it out. In sitting back and saying, okay, how can I plan? Plan, somebody said. That was their plan. And it really is about, again, not that the plan has to happen this way, but as much as you can, be in that mode of saying, this is my routine, this is how I do this. So if I say, I'm going to study for an hour in the morning, and then something happens to the kid, and the kid is throwing up and doing everything else, and you have to deal with that, you still, maybe you don't get an hour of your biology, maybe you get 15 minutes. But you still get 15 minutes of coming back to it. Because if you come back to it, you're at least going to have something that goes into short-term memory, that goes back up, that starts to make these connections, to make a longer path, so that you know things like 1 more equal, or 2 + 2 is 4. Does that make sense? So routine as much as possible. Actually, if you look at most of our jobs are short-term, right, concentration for a short amount of time. Very, very few things are 50 minutes or 2 hours. How many things are like that? Not very many. If you're a physician, if you're a paralegal, and I don't care what, everything's in short chunks, right? This amount of time is usually 30 to 90 minutes. I have had students who start at 11 minutes. And partly because their sleep is way out of whack, and partly because they're dealing with all the anxiety of all the other stuff that's going on. So sometimes they start at 11 minutes. Have you seen the Pomodoro? It's an app. You can do it on a piece of paper too. I mean, you can do it. It's basically a kitchen timer. Okay? But the app says, I'm going to set this for 25 minutes. So 25 minutes I'm going to be reading. So I don't have to keep doing this. 25 minutes, and then it just rings. And the ring is not to say, you better stop. It's to say, what's important now? What's important now? Is it important for me to continue to read? Is it important for me to take a 5-minute break? Is it important for me to, whatever, get up and go do something else? Okay? It is, and then you can set it for, maybe it's 5 minutes for that break, maybe it's a longer break, it's 15 minutes, and I'm going to get into that right here, as long as this is 30 to 90 minutes. If you go beyond that, that's where that wandering thing goes, right? And so what it means is that all of a sudden stuff's mixing up. And as it mixes up, this study said literally that people unlearn, negative learn. Yeah, and so you just read 2 chapters. You got nothing. We've all been there. Stop before that. There's nothing that says you have to study for 2 hours, or the recommendation, 1 hour at a time. Maybe not. Maybe there's too many other things going on, and so you do 30 minutes at a time, which really means 25 and a 5-minute break. Take that break, and that break can be getting up and walking around. What does a basketball player do after they shot? If I shoot and I keep shooting, am I going to get better? Nope. But if I get to that point, and then I go and get a drink of water, or I go and talk to the coach and say, you know when I put my hand like this, just doesn't work for me. Oh, this, right? So what did I just read for that 30 minutes? Go back and say, what was that about? Does that make sense? So you've taken that break, come back, your brain's ready again, productive, 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 non-productive. Again, take that break here then. You have 30 minutes of learning and soaking back, learning and soaking back, thank you. So that it's there, so that when you come back and review, you got something to review. You got the orange juice to review instead of this watered down orange juice. Does that make sense? So this could be 30 minutes. Now, if you really, really like something, can you play for an hour? Sure. Most things that we do, if you think of a concert, how long are concerts? Well, yeah, that's another story. How long? Well, there's sets though, right? There's sets within there. But it's usually about 90 minutes of a concert. Most singers, most people can't go longer than 90 minutes. How long is a sporting event? About 90 minutes.
Plain diluted orange juice.
Okay. Yep. This amount of time right here, this is your short-term memory. So that's like, if you think of the glass, it has water in it. And so I just read, maybe in a half an hour I can read, and I take my things in half an hour. Some people can take it longer. But half an hour I read 3 pages in my Bible. If I continue to read, it's like pouring orange juice on that water, and it dilutes it. So I just read 6 pages, and I got it done. Like you're supposed to do in high school, and you can check it out and say, did it, right? Don't care, because you don't know anything. It all got mixed up.
Wait a minute.
No, I'm serious. It really makes no difference, right? It makes no, if you can read the whole chapter, and if you get nothing out of it, who cares? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What matters is your investment in it. Again, just like the lifting of the weights. If you just do this, yeah, lift the weights. Yep, all right. But if there's no energy in that, there's no thought in that, there's no, right, does that make sense? So it's not about not doing it. It's about doing it more efficiently. So you do it in shorter chunks. So you do it in a 30-minute chunk, take a break, do another 30-minute chunk. You now have water and orange juice. So when you go back to review that water, you have the water to actually review and make the connections. When you sleep 7 to 8 hours, which is recommended, 7 to 8 hours. When you're sleeping during that 7 to 8 hours, your brain goes through cycles. And as it goes through the cycles, what it does is it creates chemicals that allow the cells to talk to each other. If you don't have that sleep, those cells can't talk to each other. If they don't talk to each other, there's no memorization that happens, let alone studying or studying. Right? So those chemicals are just critical to be able to connect and make it happen. So the sleep thing is it's critical. Okay? So the chemicals need to be there in order to make the connections about water, about orange juice, about any of those other things. Deal? So the other question now.
I was just going to ask, what is the time frame that you would recommend from reading or learning on a specific subject to another subject? Is that the same 30 to 90 or is that different?
Perfect. 90 minutes should be the limit for one subject, although if it's not your subject, it might be 30 minutes of that and then 30 minutes of something else that's not your subject.
Would you break it apart though?
But you break it apart. You always break it apart.
Okay.
So yeah, if it's 90 minutes, you still break it apart. And it might be that if it's physics, you use the first 30 minutes as you're reading, and then you take a break, and then 30 minutes of doing problems, and then a break, and then 30 minutes of studying and coming back to that. So it's really about mixing it up in a way, just like football player or basketball players. They practice based on what their needs are, right? Somebody's going to sit and do those free throws because that's what they need to learn how to do. So you figure out what's best for you. There's no, this is what you have to do. Do 30 minutes, do 90 minutes. Some people say that they cannot break it up and do 30 minutes of bio and 30 minutes of chemistry and then 30 minutes of math. They can't do that. They'd rather do, 90 minutes of chemistry, 90 minutes of biology, right? You decide what that is for you. Personally, I need to do it all at once. I can't bounce from one subject to the next. I have to do it all at once, but I take breaks in between. The next question that you should ask, or that you probably did ask, and I didn't let you finish. The limit before you take a serious break, like a half an hour break, is about 2 hours. If you think about factory job, right? Factory job, when do you take a break? 2 hours in, right? And then you take another half-hour break, right? At 4 hours in. It's about what your brain can and cannot do. So 90 minutes is about it. 2 hours, and the time slot for studying is about the limit before you take a pretty serious break. Sleep is critical. Getting up at the same time, 7 to 8 hours, both critical things. Naps, anywhere from 7 to 45 minutes is a limit, okay? Food is the other way to get your cells ready. Proteins, cells are made out of, the lining is made of lipids, which are the fats, and proteins, right? If you're a vegetarian, you need to make sure that, for sure, that you get those proteins. The proteins are critical for making sure that your cells can talk to each other, that these chemicals can work, okay? Spinach got a good name in the 50s, right? Popeye and the whole deal, right? Spinach, you know what happened? Somebody put the decimal point in the wrong place. Spinach is no better for you in the way of iron than other dark green leafy vegetables. Isn't that wild? But forever, we have that in our heads, right? So, figure out what works for you. Proteins are certainly helpful for the brain to be able to share and talk with. The other thing is liquid. And when I say liquid, I mean all liquids. I'll get there too. Your brain needs to have, your cells need to have the liquid to be buoyant enough for the chemicals to work, right? Does that make sense? So when you're feeling like this way, 12 ounces of water, or whatever, water. See what it does, see how it releases and lets those cells be a little more buoyant. I think it's caffeine. Caffeine is not evil. It is not evil. However, it is a chemical, and you need to figure out how it works with your brain. There's a study that was done at Johns Hopkins where the guy said, he was on a panel, and he said, people who drink caffeine have higher IQs. We all looked at it like that. Right. And what he ended up saying was that in the class that he taught, which happened to be a chemistry class, they had a placebo, meaning non-caffeine, and a caffeinated beverage that was served to his class, equal interest in chemistry, an hour before the class, at the end of the semester, every day, every time the class met. And at the end of the semester, the people who had the caffeine had higher scores on their tests. Here's the deal. Again, it's about what your body can handle, what it takes, and what it does. Because this is what they found, was that for those students who had, that was the only caffeine that they had in their day, what they found was that as they looked at the class, those students were more involved. So they asked questions. And what happens when you ask a question? Yeah, instantly you're reviewing, right? Instantly you're reviewing. And you're starting to bring that in and starting to make the connections. So the people who had the caffeine were making the connections, and they were also a little bit more like this. They were participating more. Now, if you go over the edge with a Red Bull, you might be participating so much, but you're not really, right? So figure out where that is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Caffeine is not a replacement for these chemicals. Completely different chemical. Caffeine is a dopamine. It's an incentive. It's a bump, right? These chemicals, this is the serotonin, the dopamine, are all those kind of, or serotonin and norepinephrine, that are the ones that are the connectors. Okay? They're the ones that help to mood stabilize, all of those. Right? Does that make sense? So caffeine is not evil, but it might not be what works best with your chemical makeup, right? So figure that out. Same thing with red wine. Beer, I will tell you, no, sorry. Excess alcohol, beer's okay. Excess alcohol actually strips these chemicals and makes sleep difficult. So you got a double whammy going on. I'm not saying don't, just think if that's part of what your habit is. If you do both of those, weekends are kind of tough, and a hangover really is about getting that stuff all back in balance. Okay? But a hangover can also be staying up 5 nights in a row until 3 in the morning. Same thing. Studies again show that lack of sleep is pretty much the same as being drunk. So there's a ton of stuff out there when you talk about brain chemistry stuff. I think the biggest thing is to figure out what works for you. Routine, sleep, review, actual studying, not just memorizing, working with the information, doing it in shorter chunks. All of those things are things that are helpful for most people.
Some days I wake up super early, like 5 in the morning to go to work. And then when you're at work, you're super tired. But by that time where, you wake up, so I normally wake up like between 8 and 9, and you're like super awake. Why is that?
It's that same thing, your body is adjusting to that piece. We also have rhythms. If you talk biorhythms, and you look at your biorhythms, there are biorhythms that are daily biorhythms, and there are biorhythms that are cyclical. So women's menstrual cycles tend to be on a cycle. We all tend to be on a biorhythm cycle as well, which sometimes matches and sometimes doesn't. And so part of it is in your day. My guess is you all have a time in the day where you cannot function. True statement? Yes. Mine's at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was so dangerous, man, when I'm on the road, because I know. Don't be learning during that time. So if you're talking about, again, family and all those other kinds of things that you got lined up, you don't want to be doing the things that are the academic learning, new learning kind of stuff. It's a lot of new learning you're doing when you're doing college stuff, right? A lot of new learning. You can do that during those times. If you save it all for nighttime and you say I'm a night person, you might be able to do a lot of things at night, but check and see if you're actually learning a lot of things at night. Okay? And if you're not, try to find those times during the day. If you're looking at 30-minute chunks or 20-minute chunks, you can get a lot done during the day. A lot done during the day, right? Thank you, Freddie. Anybody else? Good?